Go back to your Republic and tell them what has happened.
That would likely lead to a Republic invasion of Mandalore.
Yes, and Maul will die.
The most recent episode of the Clone Wars featured the return of the Mandalorians of Death Watch. While they do not directly interfere with the events of the episode, they are clearly there to set up the upcoming Siege of Mandalore, promised to be the center point of the Clone Wars series finale.
We were sent by Ahsoka Tano.
Ahsoka Tano. I fought by her side from the Battle of Christophsis to the Siege of Mandalore.
But with these characters showing up, we have to ask, who are these Mandalorians? And what are they doing here? And what does this mean for the future of Star Wars? Today we take a look at these 3 Mandalorians and discuss everything you need to know about their identities.
Betrothed. Little skinny, isn't she?
The woman in the middle of the group is certainly Bo-Katan. Even without looking her up in the credits, her armor, voice, and the fact that she is heavily featured in the promotional material for Season 7 means that most fans likely picked up on this almost immediately.
I claim this sword, and my rightful place as leader of Death Watch.
Never! No outsider will ever rule Mandalore.
The last time we saw Bo-Katan, she was fleeing Mandalore after Maul had killed Pre Vizsla and claimed the throne for himself. Even though the Mandalorian tradition considers victory in single combat as being sufficient to claim the title of sole ruler, Bo-Katan rejected the leadership of Maul and was obviously planning to overthrow him. We don't see her again until Star Wars Rebels, where she is sought out by Sabine Wren and presented with the Darksaber, given the opportunity to rule Mandalore herself. However, going back through the Clone Wars, Bo-Katan starts as a pretty straightforward antagonist, and there's clearly a lot of character growth that needs to happen before she turns from villain to leader. On either side of Bo-Katan are 2 Mandalorian women, although the one on her left never speaks, so we really have no hint as to her identity. The woman on her right, however, does speak, and there is something immediately familiar about her voice, and most fans automatically identified that this is someone that we have met before.
I was once a foundling.
I know.
And, in fact, she is a Mandalorian we've seen before. From her voice inflection and timbre, many people immediately associated her with the mysterious armorer from the Mandalorian series on Disney+. Listening to her voice, and with Disney surely knowing that people would jump at the opportunity for a backstory for this character, this is a pretty good guess. However, there is one other Mandalorian whose voice would be a close match for what we hear in this episode, and that would be the voice of Ursa Wren, the mother of Sabine Wren from Star Wars Rebels.
You have the Darksaber, take the Jedi and let my daughter go.
Looking at these 2 characters, it really appears that it could be either one of them. We know that Sabine's mother was a part of Death Watch, so it would make sense for her to be a part of Bo-Katan's splinter group.
I'm Clan Wren, House Vizsla.
House Vizsla? She's Death Watch. Traitor!
My mother was, but I'm not.
However, we also know that the Mandalorian Din Djarin was adopted by a clan bearing the mark of Clan Vizsla, which would also add credence to the idea that the Armorer was a part of that clan. However, perhaps the biggest clue, at least from within the episodes themselves, is the shape of their helmets and armor. While, much like male Mandalorian armor, female Mandalorian armor has a lot of commonalities and universal features, there are often subtle differences between one warrior's armor to another's. Because of this, the female Mandalorian in the episode wears armor that does bear much similarities to both the Armorer and Ursa Wren. However, there are still unique variations between them that I want to point out here. Starting with the Armorer, let's compare her armor with the armor worn in the Clone Wars. Now, with the cloaks worn by all 3 of these Mandalorian women, we can't compare their chest plates, so let's just focus on their helmets. For the Armorer, notice how harsh and angular the lines are on her helmet. And look at the protrusion down between the middle of her eyes. See how it's narrow and straight? Even accounting for the differences between live action and animated, the Armorer's helmet just seems too angular and straight to be a perfect match. But if we contrast that to the helmet of Ursa Wren, I think there are a lot more similarities. See how on Ursa's helmet, it's more about curved angles? And notice the eye protrusion again? It's significantly more triangular and curved than the Armorer's, and it's a much closer match to the helmet we see in this episode of the Clone Wars. Now sure, Mandalorians can reforge their armor as often as they like, and it would be very reasonable to assume that a Mandalorian known literally as the Armorer would have no problem doing so whenever she wished. However, I think we can discredit this, given the armor that she is wearing during the show. One of my favorite fan theories surrounding the Armorer comes from the shape of her helmet, namely these spikes rising from the top of her head. Many have noticed that it does bear some resemblance to the horns worn by the Mandalorians who served under Maul, or the Maldalorians, as they are lovingly called. Now, while these sported by the Armorer are not so drastic or large as the ones we see in the Clone Wars, they do seem to be in the same spirit of those horns, leading many to believe that the Armorer was once a member of Death Watch who remained loyal to Maul's regime. If that were the case, then we may yet still see the Armorer later this season, but not a member of Bo-Katan's Mandalorian resistance, but rather an antagonist who is loyal to Maul. If this fan theory is true, and her armor does really speak to her history as a Maldalorian, then I think it would be safe to rule out the Armorer as the identity of this second Mandalorian, leading me to believe that this character is in fact Ursa Wren, the mother of Sabine Wren, both given her armor shape, her relationship with Bo-Katan, and the fact that Sabine said that her mother was a member of Death Watch. The only real concern with this is the existence of Sabine herself. Sabine was born in 21 BBY, 2 years before Revenge of the Sith and the events of Season 7, meaning that in this scene Sabine is alive somewhere and no older than 2 years old. However, this is only the lore-related evidence. Remember earlier how I said the shape of the armor was the biggest clue from within the episodes themselves? Well, after writing this whole script and formulating all this evidence, I decided to take a look at the credits and found out that she is right there credited as Ursa Wren, telling us that this character is in fact the mother of Sabine Wren and not the Armorer. So unless the Countess of Clan Wren became a member of the Mandalorian covert on Navarro and became the Armorer there, it would seem here that this character is not the Armorer. Of course, the fact that it is Sabine's mother means that we may yet still see the Armorer later this season, but as I said, she would likely, and hopefully, be an antagonist loyal to Maul. And even still, it may also mean that a little toddler Sabine could, herself, make an appearance in this season.